Hey there, and welcome to today's Explainer. Let's just dive right into it, all right? Because today we are tackling something that literally strikes sheer panic into the heart of any homeowner. Yep, we're talking about water damage. But hey, instead of panicking, we're going to impose some serious order on that chaos, and we're going to do it using pure, verified building science. If you've ever had a pipe burst or, a roof spring a leak, you absolutely know that sinking feeling. Well, today we're breaking down the exact life cycle of a leak, specifically looking at how this whole thing plays out right here in Trussville, Alabama. We're going to look at the hard data, the local environment, and the step-by-step scientific process that pros use to pull a house back from the brink. So let's get into it. 60 minutes. That's it. That one single powerful number, that is your absolute emergency response window when water breaches your home. We're not talking about waiting a few days to see what happens. We are talking about minutes. Honestly, whether it's a busted water heater or a massive storm surge, getting commercial extractors on the scene within that first hour is literally the difference between a pretty manageable extraction job and a devastating whole house total loss. Look, if you stop the spread within those first 60 minutes, you actively halt secondary damage to your subfloors, your framing, all your personal stuff. I can't stress this enough. Time is completely of the essence. And right on the heels of that first hour is another, frankly, terrifying deadline. 24 to 48 hours. That's exactly how long it takes for mold to start growing if that water isn't properly extracted and dried out. Just think about that for a second. You've got, at most, 2 days before microscopic spores decide to turn your living room into their own private botanical garden. No thank you, right? The clock is relentlessly ticking the very second water hits your floorboards. So, to help you navigate all of this, here's our roadmap for today's Explainer. We're going to cover the water damage clock, local factors accelerating damage, the science of structural drying, the 3 phases of restoration, and finally, navigating insurance and timelines. All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the water damage clock, and exactly why time is the enemy. So here's the thing you gotta remember. Water damage is not just a static, one-time event. It's a highly active, rapidly worsening condition. Basically, the longer water sits in contact with building materials, things like drywall and insulation, the more those categories of damage multiply. As we saw, it all kicks off with that 60-minute emergency response window. Miss that, and you slide right into the 24 to 48-hour danger zone where mold growth begins. But if you handle things correctly right from the jump, the timeline shifts into a highly controlled 3 to 7 day professional drying period. It's crazy, really. What starts on a Monday as just a wet carpet can mutate into a full-blown mold remediation project needing complete wall tear-outs by Thursday if you just leave it unchecked. Moving on to Section 2, local factors accelerating damage, specifically focusing on the Trussville environment. Because, water damage doesn't just happen in a vacuum. It happens in a very specific geographic location, right? And here in Trussville, our summer humidity regularly sits over 70%. Plus, the area gets pounded with about 54 inches of rainfall every single year. Why does that matter to you? Well, because that super high ambient moisture means a wet house simply is not going to evaporate naturally. It's just not going to happen. On top of that, you've got clay-heavy soil creating some really poor drainage, especially in neighborhoods like Stockton or Cahaba Park. Actually, during sustained storms, homes over near Turkey Creek face this incredible hydrostatic pressure. It literally forces groundwater straight up through the cracks in concrete slabs. Add in those fun winter freeze events we get that drop down into the teams and burst exposed pipes up in attics, and man, you have an environment that is perfectly engineered to cause and really exacerbate water damage. And hey, it's not just the weather. The actual age of your home pretty much dictates the type of disaster you might be facing. Older homes, like the ones in Cahaba Park, built back in the 70s and 80s, they often have original plumbing that corrodes from the inside out. This ends up creating these sneaky, hidden pinhole leaks that just spray inside your wall cavities for literally weeks before you even notice a stain. But on the flip side, newer homes, like over near the Pinnacle or Tutwiler Farm, they definitely aren't immune either. They frequently suffer from defective appliance supply lines. We're talking a refrigerator ice maker line cracking or a dishwasher hose just totally failing within its first 5 years. The big takeaway here: literally no property is immune. The causes definitely change, but the need for immediate action, that remains exactly the same. All right, Section 3, the science of structural drying. We are going way beyond surface wetness here. So how do we actually fight back against all of this? Well, true restoration is definitely not about just throwing a dusty box fan on a wet rug and hoping for the best. It relies heavily on verified building science, specifically a little something called psychrometrics. Basically, this is the study of how air and moisture interact. You see, when a home floods, the water doesn't just magically disappear. It migrates deep into your structural materials. And the air inside your home, it can only hold a very specific amount of moisture at any given temperature. Once the air is fully saturated, evaporation just completely stops. Bam, done. And those wet materials, they're going to stay wet forever. That is exactly why professional technicians have to physically manipulate the indoor environment. They use these complex psychrometric calculations to determine exactly how many commercial dehumidifiers and high-speed air movers are needed to constantly pull that moisture out of the air, which then allows the drywall and the framing to finally release all that trapped water. And this sharply contrasts the two main ways people try to handle water damage. On one hand, you've got the classic DIY wait-and-see approach, basically crossing your fingers and hoping the surface water just evaporates naturally over time. But as we literally just learned about Trussville's humidity, that is basically a recipe for accidentally cultivating an indoor forest in your living room. And then, on the other hand, there are the professional IICRC S500 standards. This is the gold standard, the industry benchmark. It means technicians are coming in using specialized, penetrating moisture meters and non-invasive scanners to verify the exact moisture content of your materials, making sure everything is tracked with actual science. The stakes of improper mitigation are just incredibly high, which is why guesswork, it simply doesn't cut it. Which brings us to Section 4, the 3 phases of restoration. Let's talk about fixing the chaos. So, now that we kind of understand the science behind it, how is all this actually applied in the real world? Well, professionals use a very systematic methodology to take a property from looking like an active disaster zone right back to its pristine pre-loss condition. Step 1 is emergency extraction. This is all about getting that standing water out immediately, usually using heavy-duty truck-mounted units. Then we move into Step 2, structural drying, and that is exactly where all those psychrometric calculations we talked about come into play. Finally, Step 3 is reconstruction, putting the drywall, the flooring, and the paint all back together. What is absolutely crucial to understand here is that maintaining one single continuous company through all 3 of these phases prevents massive miscommunication, it completely eliminates those awful waiting periods between different contractors, and it ensures that the exact same people who dried your home are the ones warranting the final rebuild. It just makes sense. Always remember this. Proper structural drying requires psychrometric monitoring, not calendar days. Let me say that again. Real professionals do not just set up some equipment and say, all right, we'll swing by and pick this up in 3 days. No way. They measure every single day. They adjust the equipment based on daily moisture maps. That equipment is only removed when those penetrating meters definitively prove with actual data that the materials have safely reached their dry standard. Okay, on to our final section, Section 5, Navigating Insurance and Timelines, the final steps. Ultimately, the contamination levels of the water dictate the physical cleanup, and the data collected dictates exactly how your insurance claim is going to be processed. Water is essentially categorized into 3 distinct types. First up, you have clean water. Think of a busted supply line under your sink. The protocol here is rapid extraction and structural drying, pretty straightforward. But if it's gray water, say an overflow from a washing machine, well, now it requires extraction plus specific antimicrobial treatments because, there are contaminants in there. And finally, we have black water. This involves things like raw sewage backups or nasty storm surges. This stuff is highly toxic and requires the complete removal of porous materials and really aggressive disinfection. So as you can see, the specific category of water entirely dictates the safety protocols, how much demolition is necessary, and exactly what the insurance adjuster needs to see to actually approve your claim. And look, if you want to get a claim approved without dealing with a bunch of out-of-pocket stress, you absolutely have to speak the insurance adjuster's language. What does that mean? It means direct, clear communication. It means utilizing incredibly detailed moisture mapping and thermal imaging to actually prove the water's path. It means keeping daily progress photos and meticulous equipment logs, and generating your estimates using Xactimate, which, fun fact, is the exact same pricing software the insurance carriers use themselves. When a restoration team hands over this level of verified scientific proof, it completely streamlines the entire approval process for everyone involved. Wow, okay, we have definitely covered a lot of ground today. From the hyperlocal, super humid environmental threats right here in Trussville, to the rigid science of psychrometrics, and of course, the absolutely critical importance of that 60-minute emergency response window. So I want to leave you with this one thought. Knowing the ticking clock of water damage, and knowing that mold begins to grow in just 24 short hours, how quickly will you react when the unexpected strikes your home? Seriously, do not wait and see. Act fast, rely on the science, and protect your property. Thank you so much for hanging out with me for today's explainer, and keep learning.